Justin confirmed that was acceptable.
Great. We're glad you're able to be here in whatever capacity.
Thanks.
Michelle, are you able to promote Jeff to a panelist?
It looks like I'm not. Maybe if you make me the co-host. Yeah, there we go.
Here we go. Ah, great. Evening. Looks like Commissioner Del Rosario is on now, but not on video or audio yet. Oh, here we go. Great.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Okay. I would like to call this meeting of the Transportation Commission to order and ask that Mr. Freed take roll.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Del Rosario,
Present.
Commissioner Javandel,
Present.
Commissioner Pang,
Present.
Vice Chair Graham,
Present.
and Chair McCroskey.
Present. Great. And now I'd like to read the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and to together build a better future for all that now make this their home. With that, we'll move on to public comment. This is the time in the meeting for public comment on issues that are not otherwise on our agenda. We generally allow 3 minutes for each speaker unless there are a large number of speakers. Seeing a small number of attendees, I will ask staff to let speakers in for 3 minutes each.
Okay, our first speaker is Dwayne Vogt, I believe. Should be able to unmute and speak now. There we go.
Perfect. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. I'm very concerned with the intersection at Santa Fe and Key Route Boulevard. It's always been dangerous, but now it has gotten out of control. There was a study, which I do not have in front of me, which placed this intersection, Santa Fe and Key Route, as the 4th worst in the city. Around 1 month ago, we experienced cars doing donuts in the middle of this dangerous intersection for over a few minutes. There are still rubber tire marks at this intersection. We do not want this kind of exhibition to become a regular occurrence. There is an island that was placed some years ago on Ramona and Santa Fe that did help with the speeding that is so prevalent now on Santa Fe. But that is not helping the area at Santa Fe and Key Route. We need more speed bumps and an island at Santa Fe and Key Route to deter these sideshows. Thank you.
Thank you.
It wasn't Dwayne.
And Chair, I don't see any more hands at the moment.
All right, waiting a moment to see if there are any others wishing to make public comment for items not otherwise on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the next item, presentations. And looking for staff reports.
Just give me a moment.
Certainly.
go. So first report is the police data reporting on the months of June and July. There was one pedestrian collision reported. Sorry, this is the wrong. Hold on one second. That's the wrong presentation.
Take your time.
All right, let's try this again. There we go. That's a better date. So I had September of last year. So for the months of June and July, there was one pedestrian collision reported in each of those months. There were 2 bicycle involved collisions reported in July and none in June. In June, there were 10 collisions reported, 2 of which were injury collisions, and in July, 12 collisions, 4 of which were injury collisions. 13 moving citations were issued in June and 43 in July, and 3 DUI were reported in June and 1 in July. That concludes my report on the police data.
Thank you. Any commissioner questions on the data just reported? Seeing none, we'll take public comment on this item. Are there any public attendees who wish to make ask questions or make a comment on this data? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission and ask for any comments that the commissioners might have. Seeing none, I will thank staff for the report and move us on to the next item.
This item is reporting on first and second quarters for gig car share usage. The last report out was on January activity. Have switched to quarterly reports from gig. The membership rose from 686 in the first quarter to 787. And the trip starts rose from 1,759 in the first quarter. I'm showing here average by month to be in line with previous month by month reporting, and 2,115 trip starts in the second quarter. As we move forward with this next round of reporting, barring interest in the commission and having the 2018, 2019 earlier data rather than have 3 versions of data reporting, I was going to, after this, move to just continuing from the end of 2019, 2020 data we've been getting and this new reporting, so that it hopefully is more legible information to read going forward. But if you have feedback on that, let me know.
Great. Thank you for that. Questions from the commission? Seeing none, let's take any questions or comments from the public. And if you're unfamiliar with the system, I'm sorry I didn't mention earlier, use the raise your hand function, either at the bottom of your screen, or it might be a little more difficult on your phone, but should be available. I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand, which means I'm going to bring it back to the commission for comments and feedback to staff. Seeing none, I'll start. I understand that there are 2 different measuring systems. Maybe one way to handle that would be to have a vertical line on the left, near the left axis of the graph going forward, with the date range and a note about the different recording method or collection method of data. I understand it's a completely different scale, but that would still give us a point of reference, take up very little space, and still serve as somewhat of a reference. Other thoughts? Seeing none, I will thank staff for this report, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with next time. And that will move us right along to our consent calendar, which has one item: the Transportation Commission meeting minutes of July 28th of this year. Are there any questions from the commission? Or let me put that a different way. Since this is a consent calendar, does any member of the commission wish to pull this item for discussion? Seeing and hearing none, I will ask if any member of the public wishes to pull the minutes from the consent calendar for discussion. Seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission, and I've got a hand raised. Commissioner Javadin.
Thank you. I'd like to move approval of the consent calendar.
Second that.
Commissioner Peng seconds. Great. Any further discussion? Mr. Freed, could you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Del Rosario,
I will abstain. I wasn't here for the last meeting.
Commissioner Javandel,
Aye.
Commissioner Peng,
Yes.
Vice Chair Graham,
I'll abstain as well.
Chair McCroskey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Consent calendar carries. Great. That will move us on to item number 5, and specifically item 5.1, the appeal or not of a blue curbing. Staff, please.
So I would recommend opening up for public comment, barring comment. I don't see a reason for commission discussion or action on this item. I am available to present this if need be.
Let's see if the public wishes to object to the, I'm sorry, what's the wishes to object to this curb, essentially. Do any members of the public here tonight wish to state an objection to this curb being implemented? Not seeing any hands raised, I will thank staff for being prepared and return it to staff to handle this issue. Thank you. And for anyone who is attending the meeting and is not familiar with this item, the initial appeal was dropped, but we still had it on our calendar and it was noticed. That's why it appeared at the meeting. And we'll move on to item number 5.2, the Rainbow Crosswalk proposal for the southern crosswalk of Cornell Avenue at Solano Avenue. I believe we have a staff report.
Yes, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Just give me a moment to share my screen. I have a brief PowerPoint presentation for you on this. There we go. This item came about at the request of the City Council to explore the feasibility and interest in a rainbow crosswalk for the southern crosswalk of Cornell Avenue. And what we're asking this evening is for the Commission to consider making a recommendation to the City Council to install a crosswalk at that location. So what we're talking about is this is Solano Avenue going from the lower right screen up to the upper left. So we're looking south, bird's eye view, looking south more or less. This is Cornell. Cornell School is in the middle of the screen. Tay Cafe, for example, is right on that corner. We're talking about this crosswalk right here. This is a roadway that's seen a lot of utility work in the last couple of years. Both the city did some sewer work and the East Bay Mud did some water line work. And we have, starting in the near future, the next few months, a paving project. And so the timing is good to incorporate a special pedestrian crossing treatment at that location. Typically, we are trying to implement wherever feasible. These days, implement what's called the 444 pattern of a crosswalk. The commission is familiar with that and have discussed that in the past. And working with community representatives have come up with a slightly different rainbow version of the 444, which incorporates the conventional, most common 6 colors in a rainbow flag in the pattern of the 444. It does maintain the yellow crosswalk, standard crosswalk lines that would normally meet the technical requirements of a crosswalk next to a school. So with that, I will stop my screen share. We think this is a pretty straightforward effort. We did send out a public notice to everyone within about 150 feet. I believe, I haven't checked in the last few hours, but I don't believe we've gotten any comments by email or anything else regarding this proposal, and be happy to answer any questions from the commission on this idea. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Any commission questions for staff? Commissioner Del Rosario, and then Commissioner Peng.
Yeah, thanks. So this is really exciting, and I'm very supportive of it. Had a couple of questions. One, do you know what kind of, the staff report talked about findings that will be prepared for City Council. Do you know what that looks like at this point?
I want to do a little bit more research on that. It's kind of falling into a little bit of a bureaucratic black hole here. The Federal Highway Administration doesn't particularly like these rainbow crosswalks. There has been a lot of discussion in the transportation community about this. They are being implemented all over the country. I'm not aware of any research that indicates any safety issues with this. And in fact, I think the report that Commissioner Peng provided the commission a couple of months ago discussed that a little bit as well. And I'd just like to be able to, for the City Council, when they formally approve it, cite some of those studies and reports so that we have good information in the record. I'd certainly use the report that Commissioner Peng did, and I'd like to see if other cities have made similar findings and basically use some of those same findings.
And my second question, thank you, that's great. My second question is, before we put the permanent treatment, is there any benefit to painting a temporary treatment of this? Or is that not? It will probably, it's a paving project, so I don't know exactly the schedule, but I would expect that we'll see this paving project completed in the next, weather permitting, sometime in the next 6 months or so. Oh, okay. So
this is really the time to make a decision about this so that we can incorporate it into the contract.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Peng.
Thanks for the report. It's great progress. Just wondering what is the funding source for this painting job, and then if it is incorporated with the painting project along Cornell, can it be added to the other side of the school side? I think Talbot and Solano.
We can look into that. I don't know if there's any road work on the Talbot Solano side. I can explore whether there's any paving work going on the north side of the Solano Cornell intersection. In other words, whether there's any patching work as part of this contract. What we're trying to do is put it in at a time when there's not going to be more utility work coming through in the next few years. That's basically our strategy here. So we were kind of strategic in trying to find a good location, a prominent location, but one that hopefully will not be torn up anytime soon.
And then the cost will be just folded in.
Yeah, it's just part of the regular paving. It would be, I'm sure there's some incremental cost because of the specialty colors and so forth, but that is, that's just part of the regular paving project budget.
Yeah, based on my observation, both intersections are equally busy during like school times. So it would be nice to have both.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you. That would be a fine thing to incorporate if you would wish to make that in your recommendation. We can incorporate that.
We'll come back to that. Commissioner Javidal.
Just wanted to check if the standard lateral crosswalk lines are going to be thermoplastic, the yellow ones.
I think the Public Works Department is exploring the best solution to that is probably thermoplastic, but leave it to them to select the material that's going to be the most effective and long lasting.
That makes sense. I just wasn't aware of the multiple colors in thermoplastic, but
There are
we can.
there are vendors out there that have this now, and
Okay.
So we think we can do it pretty easily.
Then whatever works.
Sounds like MMA has been the use for some more of the colored treatments.
Gotcha.
If you know of an issue, if the yellow lines need to be the same or whatever, curious to hear feedback, but
I'm not. The only reason I asked is just in terms of making sure that we build in the retroreflectivity and with thermoplastic, that's standard. So, if the rest of it can have the retroreflectivity, great. If not, we still have the basic lines there, so we meet the minimum.
got it. Thank you.
Well, I have a question. This is an unusual opportunity with this number of colors. Are there any other points or places in this repaving job that would benefit from the addition of any of these colors?
You mean other crosswalks?
I mean, any other thermoplastic implemented markings in this project?
Well, typically for road markings, I think that it's either white or yellow, depending on whether or not there's a school, or green for bicycle facilities. I'm sorry, I guess I'm not understanding. Are you suggesting particular rainbow colors, or just being more creative with kind of art treatments or something like that?
Yes, and I have a certain amount of whimsy, so of course I'm thinking of smiley faces or helmet detail on the bike boulevard or Sharrow markings, but that's whimsical and maybe not needed. But I would throw it out there. You're ordering these colors; they're going to be heated up on the project. It could be an opportunity. I don't think we have time in this particular time schedule to design a piece of public art. I'm not suggesting that necessarily, but
yeah, I think that's something be happy to explore and talk about how we could do that. I'm not sure it's practical to incorporate it into this particular contract since I believe it's already out to bid.
This is a challenge to staff. This is not a direction.
Okay.
From me anyway.
Okay.
And we're moving into the opinion side here. But Commissioner Peng, did you have a further comment?
Yeah, actually, just want to add to your question. Since painting a crosswalk depends on how we order this paint, right? Is there any residual? Like, do we have to order a whole bucket just to paint little piece? If we have leftover, I think the chair's idea was great. Add more along the bike boulevard or something. Don't waste it. But I say that without knowing how we order it, how this is processed. But that's just a comment.
Right. Okay. We can look into that. The vendor, the painting subcontractor would be doing that kind of work for us. That wouldn't be city staff actually doing the painting, the rainbow or anything else. But we can work with them to see what our options are on this or on future projects.
Thanks.
Unless there are any further questions for the commission, I think we should turn it over to public comment as we verge into opinions and commission comments. So at this point, looks like we have the same attendees. So use the raise your hand feature if you're interested in commenting on this. Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the commission for comments and opinions and any further questions. Commissioner Del Rosario.
Yeah, very excited about this and happy to support it. And some of the additional comments that were brought up by the commission of looking at the crosswalk on the other side of the street and extra uses for the paint. Yeah, I don't think we have to hold staff to it, but I think those are good things to explore. The other thing I want to make sure we include in there is that the traffic control for the full project just needs to be looked at closely because there is a bus stop right past the intersection there, and so that's often a tricky thing to have the right type of traffic control where accessibility to the bus is not impeded from the sidewalk. But otherwise, exciting project.
Other comments? I will say that from a cycling standpoint, the 444 is designed to allow both pedestrians, people with mobility issues, and cyclists to go through the crosswalk without passing over the big swaths of thermoplasty, which can be really important on a rainy day, for example. I guess, or if some kid loses their lunch. But so I'm in favor of making those outer bars either as thin as possible, or perhaps actually painting them if that's appropriate, to make sure that we get good adhesion for people going across the crosswalk on small wheeled devices and non-motorized. There's no good catch-all. I think you understand what I mean. Any other comments or opinions from the commission? I think perhaps we're ready for a motion. Since no one's offering one, I will. I move that we recommend to the City Council the implementation of the Rainbow Crosswalk as designed and modified, if necessary, by staff for the intersection of Cornell and Solano, with the further recommendation that the corresponding crosswalk in the next intersection at Talbot and Solano also be considered for treatment.
I'll second that.
Shavendell seconds. Discussion? Hearing none, I think we're ready for a roll vote.
Commissioner Del Rosario,
Yes.
Commissioner Javendel,
Aye.
Commissioner Peng,
Yes.
Vice Chair Graham,
Yes.
Chair McCroskey.
Yes,
Motion carries.
great.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you for that report and proposal. With that, we move on to item number 5.3, the presentation by VIO of proposed shared mobility deployment in Albany.
Second, welcome Monica and Stuart from VIO.
Welcome.
Great, sorry. Thank you. And thank you for pronouncing VO correctly. We half the time hear it as VEO, so it's very exciting that you got it VO. Hi, everyone. My name is Monica DeLulo. I'm the Policy and Partnerships Manager for the Northwest at VO. Stuart Cottrell is my colleague. He works as our local operations manager based out of Alameda and works in our warehouse in Oakland.
Good evening, everybody.
Awesome. So we just have a brief presentation for you on our operations in the East Bay and our intentions to continue to expand our service area to include other cities and continue connecting different cities across the East Bay. Stu, are you able to share your screen? Perfect. All right. We skipped past the snazzy title slide. That's okay. Again, thank you. You can go to the next slide, Stu. Thank you. So we are VIO. We're a shared micromobility operator that operates in over 50 cities and on college campuses across the United States. We were originally founded in 2017 and have been around as long as some of our other competitors and have grown from smaller markets, primarily Midwestern college towns or smaller cities in the Midwest, and scaled in a way that has allowed us to take on work as we take in dollars and create a sustainable business model, and are now expanding to larger cities. We launched in Oakland in February of 2021. And when Berkeley set up their permit process, we applied and were selected as one of their first operators and launched in April in Berkeley and concurrently Emeryville of this year. Our fleets are 100% electric and designed in environmentally sustainable ways. We work with communities and cities directly to achieve kind of the highest quality of service. In all of our markets, we really prioritize directly kind of connecting with communities that we operate in, the city stakeholders. I work with several, nonprofit organizations and other groups to make sure that we are being amenable to issues as they arise with the cities and are responsive to community needs. We hire an employee workforce of strictly W-2 employees in our East Bay market and the majority of our markets. The only exception would be in markets that winterize, which means that we take our scooters off the street for the winter months for safety reasons. We also design and manufacture all of our devices in-house, which means that we have the ability to iterate on our product and create products that are specified to the local market. In Berkeley, we operate a fleet, and I'll get into this in just a moment, of seated and standing scooters in Oakland and Emeryville. And what we'll be doing soon is kind of outfitting those devices with baskets that our team has designed. And then just taking the existing devices, adding baskets to them rather than having to kind of infleet a new device with a basket on it. Because we design and manufacture everything in-house, we have the ability to kind of create those new products and additions to our devices. You can go to the next slide, Stu. Like I said, we operate in over 50 cities and university campuses across the US. You can go next slide. So our team in the Bay Area consists of myself, Stu, Jeff Hoover, who is our Director of Government Partnerships, is actually based in Oakland, and Kristen Benison is our California Regional Manager. If you reach out to the team through the email that we share at the end of the slide, this is kind of the team that you'll be connecting with. And Stu manages a team of local technicians and mechanics out of our warehouse as well. Next slide, please. So our East Bay fleet, like I said, includes our standing scooter and our seated scooter. The standing scooter is called the Astro. Seated is the Cosmo. Some people like to say it looks like a bike. I promise it's not a bike. If you've had the chance to ride any of them, you'll know that the standing scooter operates like many other operators. Standing scooters, you push off, press down on the throttle, you start to ride, and it caps out at 15 miles per hour. There's the option to limit that speed if you would like to learn how to ride at a lower speed. Similarly, on the Cosmo, you sit down. I like to say it's like a mini baby version of a moped. It goes caps out at 15 miles an hour as well, but it's a little more comfortable of a ride. I personally love to wear skirts and boots, and heeled boots, and I don't typically love to hop on a standing scooter because I'll kind of feel a little wobbly. And so sitting on the Cosmo allows folks who may be mobility impaired, maybe wearing high-heeled boots, to sit down as they ride and just have a different option, which opens up a new avenue for folks to get around. We see that our trips on our Cosmo are typically about 40% longer in both distance and duration. So people feel a little more comfortable to ride for a little bit longer, which opens up a new kind of radius of trips to be taken on a micromobility device. Next slide, please. This is our adaptive device that's also available at our East Bay warehouse. This device can be rented for up to a week or more. We're pretty flexible. If anyone calls into our warehouse or into our customer service, they can reach out and say, hey, I'd like to, rent this device. The adaptive device is essentially the connection to that standard wheelchair. And so we will bring it to them, help install it to the standard wheelchair, and then they can keep it for up to a week completely free of charge. If they want to keep it longer than that, we don't have outstanding reservations. That's obviously also on the table. So next slide, please. So what does VO kind of look like when you open the app? I'm assuming that since we've launched in Berkeley and y'all are so close, you've obviously downloaded the app and taken so many rides already. You're all our power users, I'm sure. But in case you haven't, this is what our app looks like when you open it up. You'll see that the shaded red area is no ride, no service zone. That no longer includes Emeryville. We've kind of opened that up since this screenshot was taken. But you open it up, you can identify on a map where the closest device is to you. You can kind of tap that device and say, okay, what's the battery percentage looking like? Where exactly is it? If you're nearby and you can't seem to find it for whatever reason, you can hit ring and it'll kind of ping the device and you'll be able to audibly hear it where it is on the street. And then you go hop on. All of the trips must start and end within the outlined zone. So that's within, Berkeley, Oakland, and Emeryville currently. Riders in the East Bay are required to park to a bike rack using our integrated Bluetooth lock. And so we only deploy to bike racks, and riders are frequently reminded and required to park to those bike racks as well. So it does require bike rack infrastructure to already be built. But I know I've driven down Solano several times, and I know there's fantastic bicycle infrastructure along Solano already and in other parts of Albany. Proper parking and what we kind of communicate to our riders means no parking near fire hydrants, metered spaces, no standing zones, street walkways, anywhere basically blocking the right of way for pedestrians to get by. Riders are fined for non-compliance. They're kind of initially, if they're found to be parking inappropriately and someone reports their device, we'll do a verification to make sure that in fact that rider did park inappropriately. Then we'll send them a warning initially. If they continue to receive multiple warnings, they will receive escalating fines. And then by the fourth fine, they're actually removed from the platform. So we're pretty intense about not accepting bad parking behavior or impeding right of way for folks. Next slide, please. We also have the ability to provide access for non-smartphone users. And this is kind of our graphic that we hand out at our outreach events for just what does that look like? How do you actually do that? If you have questions, I'm happy to go into that, but we can go to the next slide. We also provide something called the VO Access program. So VO Access is a low income discount program. So anyone who's a recipient of any state, local, federal, and now also any student who's a recipient of Pell Grant or FAFSA at any level is eligible for the VO Access program. This has been hugely helpful, we found, with UC Berkeley students primarily. Students in the East Bay and folks in the East Bay who are qualified for the VO Access program sign up through our website. They'll get a text message notification when their application is approved. They then pay a $5 per year kind of annual charge just to be opted into that program. They're never paying any unlock fees. So we typically have a pricing structure of $1 to unlock and 39 cents per minute. They're not paying the unlock fees. Their first ride on any ride ever. Their first ride every day up to 30 minutes is completely complimentary. Any subsequent rides or subsequent minutes thereafter are discounted to 20 cents per minute. And again, they're not paying the unlock fee. So it's just the 20 cents per minute. Folks can apply online. They can apply through over the phone. They just have to provide documentation, and none of that documentation is stored after the fact. It's used just to verify, and then we actually get rid of it. Next slide, please. A little bit about our community engagement principles. So we have a customer service team, and we have actually a call-in line, which a lot of, I think, tech companies and companies more generally have moved away from call-in lines and moved to online forms. But we have prioritized kind of continuing to have a way for folks to call in. And we also have a local operations team who is on the ground and Stu manages, and they're available to kind of address any issues that the community comes up with. I always gloat because Stu is my favorite operations manager to work with. If we get an email any time of day, any day of the week. Stu, I've seen respond within like 2 minutes that he has a technician on the way to go address something. So Stu's fantastic and is incredibly responsive to any concerns from the community that arise. We also work with local community partners and city council members to host events, promote safe riding practices. We hand out free helmets. We actually attended Albany's Juneteenth event at the invitation from Councilwoman Janelle Gary. And we handed out some free helmets, got to meet people, tell them about our service in Berkeley and remind them how to ride safely. And we're always continuing to coordinate with community stakeholders, UC Berkeley, others to provide the most tailored service for the local community. We've been in conversation with UC Berkeley for several months now and are kind of waiting imminently for them to propose, they're opening the shared mobility system to the campus. And we're excited that, with Albany also opening up, we'll be able to connect the satellite campus to the main campus as well with this service. We have over 8,000 local riders across the East Bay, and we're continuing to provide an exemplary service to them, but also to the residents of all of the cities that we operate in. Next slide, please. A little more on our safety initiatives. We provide in-app helmet wearing instructions and reminders. Anyone who wants a helmet can actually call into our customer service line or phone it or message in, whatever they would like, and we'll actually deliver a helmet to them completely free of charge. We have no sidewalk riding reminders on the vehicles, vehicle identification information, and our customer support number on the vehicles. We have social media and email communications to riders and text message communications. And we also create something called education mode in the app, which I referenced earlier, where folks can actually select to be limited to 8 miles per hour rather than 15 for any duration of time while they're using the app, just so that if they want, to learn how to ride at a slower speed, that's an option to them. 8 miles an hour is kind of the sweet spot. This says first 3 rides, but it's really any amount of rides. It's kind of the sweet spot, 8 miles per hour, where you're going fast enough that you're not kind of wobbly, but you're also not feeling like you're going too fast. This is just an example of one of our pieces of kind of safety information that we hand out at our local events. Next slide, please. Awesome. So I'll let Stu get into this, but we're just going to go through kind of specifically what we're thinking in terms of a deployment strategy and deployment plan in Albany, and would be absolutely willing to have to hear feedback from the commission once we kind of present this. Stu, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Monica. So you might be asking yourself, what would VO in Albany look like from a logistical standpoint? So essentially, we are extending our current service area and including Albany as a start and endpoint. VO customers would now be allowed to ride vehicles in from neighboring Berkeley and park them in Albany. Any vehicle that's picked up in Albany could also be dropped off by riders in Albany or Berkeley, Emeryville, or Oakland. We do have a few exceptions, as Monica mentioned earlier. The kind of big one is the UC Berkeley campus. That is currently not a permitted area to park vehicles. We are hoping to have that change soon. Our local operations team, we also regularly what we call rebalance any vehicles that are parked outside of designated hubs, such as areas that might be primarily residential and away from foot traffic or transit corridors, especially if they have been sitting idle for longer than 72 hours. We are also extremely responsive to any custom requests that are sent to the VO customer service team in the event that a vehicle is parked incorrectly, such as on private property, or if it's obstructing access on the sidewalk or someone's driveway or something like that. As far as hubs, so hubs are essentially areas that are near high foot traffic or transit corridors where our local operations team would rebalance the vehicles to in the hopes that they would be have a greater chance of getting picked up. Hubs can host anywhere from 1 to 6 vehicles. I would propose in Albany would be more like 1 to 3 per hub. Actual deployment will depend on the availability of bike rack infrastructure in these proposed locations. So you'll see here a map of some suggested hub locations, which are very fluid and not committed to anything. We are very open to hearing what the commission has to say, as well as the public. But as you can see on the west side, we do know that a large portion of Albany's population resides along the Pierce Street residential complexes. So we proposed a couple of hubs there, as well as south of there at Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park. North San Pablo near Albany Square, Memorial Park, a few hubs along Solano, one at San Pablo, one at Cornell, hopefully near a future rainbow crosswalk, and then one along Masonic, along the Albany Greenway. The Safeway on Solano and Nielsen near the Berkeley border, City Hall near San Pablo and Marin, the library near Masonic and Marin, and then University Village, at least as close as we could get without encroaching on the UC's property. And we have proposed a hub near the corner of San Pablo and Dartmouth.
Great. Thank you for having us and allowing us to present to the commission. We're excited to continue to, like I said, to increase our service area to incorporate more of the East Bay community. You're welcome to reach out to us. My personal email is on here. You can also reach out to us at abyops@voride.com. That will send a message to our entire local team that I introduced kind of at the start when I said meet the team. Myself, Stuart, and then Stuart can kind of direct kind of any logistical or operations concerns to his local team to address on the ground. You can also reach out for general inquiries to our customer service line. And this is the phone number. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Of course.
Let's start with commissioner questions. Commissioner Peng.
I just some comment. I just want to add to that. VO has been really cautious about the community, and they did a lot of work, reach out to the neighborhood before they launch. So I really appreciate that. And based on my understanding, they also are committed to do a lot of public outreach. So more people in Albany would understand this. This is great. Instead of just dumping equipment on the street like the early years in San Francisco, I think this is a much more acceptable way for Albany to lay the ground for you guys. Also, regarding the hubs, I think it's really helpful that you guys put the hubs on the west, on the Pierce Street, because last time when I was there doing public outreach, residents there are still asking when the AC Transit is gonna resume service over there. They need a good connection to the Bart. So hopefully, I'm not sure if that can solve all the problem, but placing some hubs over there would be helpful. The other comment I'll say to the commission, and also to the city, is that it seems like this micromobility will increase, and also we are approving more and more high density housing along the San Pablo Avenue. People with less cars, more dependent on active transportation, would need more infrastructure. So we need to look at, adding city-sponsored bike racks and infrastructures to facilitate this trend. Let me see what else. And also one question, why I see all the VO vehicles are kind of locked to either a post or something. What's the point? I was just hoping for more freedom. It's a dockless, and then why we have like dangling a cable over there seems to be redundant for me. But please shed some light on this. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the questions. And like Commissioner Peng said, we've actually been working really closely with Councilwoman Janelle Gary, former mayor. We've kind of been working hand in hand with her to connect with Justin and talk with Nelson and others. We have a town hall in the city scheduled on October 5th in the evening. And then we're actually doing a demo ride day on October 8th. Our intention is to launch October 15th and kind of open up the service area on October 15th, and then start to kind of place vehicles in the service area and rebalanced those hubs as things kind of organically move from Berkeley and down Solano Ave. We see a lot of folks kind of riding down Solano and then getting stuck at the end of the service area once it kind of switches from Berkeley to Albany. So we're constantly kind of having to move devices from the edge of the service area back up Solano or to other areas. And so we're excited to kind of continue to just allow folks to ride. The reason that we have Lock 2 in the East Bay is that it's a requirement of both Oakland and Berkeley. Those cities have had a history of vehicles ending up in places that they didn't necessarily want them. And so the purpose of the Lock 2 system is kind of to deter vehicles that are parked from being moved after they've been parked. So it's not to get like too in the weeds here, but a lot of it was like some things ending up in Lake Merritt or too close to Lake Merritt for comfort. And so that's when Oakland had initially kind of set up the Lock 2 system. And they found that it's actually been quite useful. And the cities are kind of enjoying having it. And if there is, an option for us to deploy to areas without locking to a bike rack, but just like deploy in the furniture zone near a bike rack, that's something that Stu's local team is willing to, be amenable to. Like, we don't have to lock to the bike racks, but when folks are done at the end of their rides, they can lock to the bike racks if they choose to do so. And like I said, kind of during the presentation, our messaging and, the way that we communicate with our riders is you should lock to specifically bike racks. Folks will end up locking to posts or something if there's not sufficient bike rack infrastructure nearby. But like Councilman Pang was saying, or Commissioner Pang, excuse me, so many titles. It would be great to kind of support adding additional infrastructure to the city to allow folks to ride comfortably and lock comfortably to different areas.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Other commissioner questions? Commissioner Del Rosario.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I had a few questions. How do you know if there is a parking violation? Is the geo coordinates like that precise, or is it you have to take a photo of the scooter when you park it?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the ride, our users are prompted to take a photo to end the ride. They can't end the ride without taking the photo. That's basically, and with every company, the way that it works is that is a verification step. There's no like AI going back and double checking, like, is this scooter parked appropriately? But if we are to get a ticket on that device that says this scooter was knocked over or it was left in the middle of a crosswalk or something like that, we would go back and we would verify that indeed that scooter was parked improperly. Maybe that person just left the device, in the crosswalk, took a picture of the street and walked away. In that instance is when we issue the violation. And Stu's team is responsive within, like I said, folks email in and he responds within 2 to 3 minutes. Sometimes it's fantastic. Stu's team is responsible for going out and retrieving that device and rebalancing it to an appropriate location. We're also rolling out something called tip over detection. It's kind of in the process right now, or in the kind of at the works right now, but it's, an actual kind of component in the IoT or the brain of the device that has the GPS and, remotely unlocks it, kind of connects to the battery and everything. That'll be kind of like a gyroscope. And so in the hopefully not too distant future, when the device is knocked over, we'll actually get a notification automatically sent to our local team, and then they will know to go pick that up without a ticket having to be issued by someone on the street.
And then to deter future violations, if one of our riders does receive a violation, they get an initial warning, and then they do get fined for each violation. After that, those fines do increase up to a certain point in which they're then essentially kicked out of the system, since we do not want bad behavior, which has a pretty lasting impact. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. That was helpful. A couple other questions. Do you have challenges with youth riding your vehicles, and is that something you have to try to deter?
So we actually have ID verification that requires our riders to be 18 and over. When you initially make an account before you're able to unlock a device, you're prompted to scan the front and back of your ID, and that actually runs through AI through a third-party vendor. We don't store anybody's ID information. but you do have to scan and verify with a state issued ID. We have a bunch of different IDs, but you do have to verify that you're over 18 in order to ride. So we haven't seen much of a concern around youth riding in the East Bay. I actually haven't received any complaints directly. I don't know if Stu has.
I have not.
Great.
Great. And then my last question is, have you had any agreements with other cities where there's a revenue sharing model?
There are a myriad of different ways that cities kind of set up their fee structure. And so typically what we've seen in the East Bay and in a lot of California markets is an annual fee. There'll be like an application fee, and then there'll be an annual fee for, operating in the market. Sometimes San Jose, for instance, has like a per device fee. So in addition to the annual fee, there'll be a small, $65, I think, per device fee that the operators must charge per deployed vehicle. In some markets, and not in any Bay Area market, but I know in other markets, we have a revenue sharing model where the fee will be based on the number of trips. I personally like this model and professionally like this model because it incentivizes both us and the city to encourage ridership, because as we get more rides, the city gets more revenue because they're getting a percentage or a tax on each ride. That's kind of the most mutually beneficial relationship. In our other East Bay markets, it's more of the annual model structure or annual fee model. Thank you for the question.
Can I follow up on that? And sorry, Chair.
No, please.
But can I follow up with that and ask, do you know, so most of the times when there's programs like this, the revenue is tied to funding another program. Like, are you aware of any of those examples?
Yeah, absolutely.
For like permit fees and all the staffing and administration. Curious about that.
Yeah, of course. So a portion of the fees that are paid to the city of Oakland or to OCDOT go toward funding new bike rack infrastructure to allow for more areas to park locations. So that's absolutely an option. I think that what's great about the way that Albany is going about this is like kind of setting it up and, building the plane as we fly it in a sense, and figuring out what works best for the city of Albany, because it's a unique place and in a unique city. And so I think that that is something that probably Justin can hash out in the writing of the permit. Okay. And the ordinance potentially to go along with it.
Okay. And then my last question is the employment model. Sorry, is it contractors that come and charge the scooters and stuff, or is that not the case anymore?
Our entire team is W-2 employees. We do all of our battery swaps in-house. We do not contract out to any third parties to run any of our charging operations.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually have a swappable battery system, so we don't have to take the device off of the street to charge it. The only time we take a device off the street is if it needs to be maintenance for whatever reason, if there's a mechanical issue or it's been damaged, then we'll take it off the street. But we actually just bring batteries around and swap the batteries out rather than having to swap the entire vehicle out.
I think I'm done now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, of course.
No problem. That's what we're here for, to ask the questions.
Absolutely.
Other commissioner questions?
Commissioner Graham has her hand up.
Oh, great. Thank you. I can't see that.
Sorry if you said this, but how do you procure your energy that you use to charge your batteries?
We're on the same grid as Oakland, and so I believe we're opted into the 100% renewable option that PG&E has. And if not, Stu, we can talk to whoever it is pays our PG&E bill. But yeah, we just go through the typical kind of whatever is available in the city and is providing power to our warehouse.
That's my only question, although I'm not quite sure if you answered it exactly. I guess I was getting to understand if you did use the 100% renewable as your source of power. But
yeah, absolutely. I don't have the answer to that right now, but I'm happy to follow up with the answer once we figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Other commissioner questions? I'll take a turn. A lot of details here. Thank you. This is great. So let's say I take the 18 bus on Solano Avenue and I get off near one of your points, and I grab a scooter. I've signed up previously, so I log in pretty quickly. Got my helmet with me, so I'm staying safe. They looked at me strange on the bus because I didn't put my bike on the front and I had a helmet, but that's okay. I got my helmet, and I ride it home, several blocks away. There are no public bike racks near my home, so I use this stanchion on the guide wire that's helping to hold up the telephone pole across the street. But I keep the scooter out of the sidewalk and I lock it up, take my picture. Great, I'm home. Next day, I want to go back to the bus. The scooter may or may not be there, or I may have to go to another of your God, the term is skipping my mind, of your
Hub.
Sorry.
Hubs.
Hub.
Hub. I'm gonna have to go to another one of your hubs to pick up a scooter and get where I need to go. So that's the basic cycle. And there are presumably bike racks near most of the bus stops on Solano. So that end of it is pretty straightforward. Okay. That's great because I'm catching the 18 or the G to San Francisco. But then one day a week, I want to take Bart. So I go to one of your hubs and I grab the scooter, and presumably you have geofenced or intend to geofence the Greenway either at the border, which is then has no bike racks, or even at Brighton Street, which has no real public bike racks within a 1 or 2 block radius. That's almost completely true. And not a lot of street furniture in general that could be appropriate to lock to. How do you plan to, where are you going to geofence around the Greenway and the access to Bart, and how do you plan to handle that situation?
Yeah, so I'm presuming you mean North Berkeley Bart in this instance.
No, actually, I'm sorry, I'm a North Albany guy. I'm thinking of the El Cerrito Plaza Bart station.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see Albany as a really important step and kind of continuing to expand our service into the rest of the East Bay. And so El Cerrito is kind of, I want to say, next on the list without giving away too much of our internal goings on. But, we're really hoping that after opening Albany, that will create, an opportunity to chat with El Cerrito and see if we can continue to expand service area. We do have a contract with Bart to be able to lock and park on Bart property. And so there is bike rack infrastructure at most of the Bart stations, if not all that I've seen. And so you could park at the Bart station. Are you asking how we intend to geofence the Albany Greenway in the sense of, will it be a slow ride zone? Will it be completely open? Will you be able to ride past the border of Albany into El Cerrito?
Well, since you offer all of those things.
Yeah. I mean, that's the ideal kind of situation. We do have the option to create kind of different types of geofences. So without getting too into the weeds, we have the option to do no ride zones. We have the option, which allows folks to not only not park in an area, but also not ride into an area. So the GPS will ping that they're in a no ride zone. The vehicle will slow to a stop, and they'll be actually given, our vehicles have this feature called VO Voice, where they'll be given an audible notification that they should exit the area or turn around because they've entered a no ride zone, which is awesome. And makes it a little less confusing for the user as they're on the device. We have the option to do slow ride zones. So that limits the speed to 8 miles an hour rather than 15 if we want to, it's a highly trafficked corridor or, whatever it is, there's an event going on. And so we don't want people riding at 15 miles an hour down a street during the farmer's market or like whatever it is. We have the option to do no parking zone. So folks can ride through an area, but they can't stop in the area and park. Given the state of our, contractual obligations to cities that we operate in. We never launch in a city, and we have never launched in a city without a contract in place that states that we are an allowed operator after working with the city. So we wouldn't just like open El Cerrito necessarily before we have this conversation with them and make sure that, we've secured a permit, a business license, all of the above. And so once that happens, in theory, yes, you can ride on the Albany Greenway. That's perfect. It's a beautiful ride. You park at the Bart station and you're on your way to San Francisco.
Well, in the meantime, as I said, I'm a Northern Albany kind of guy. It's a significantly further distance for me to go to North Berkeley Bart. So I'm going to grab a scooter and I'm going to go as far as I can to get close to El Cerrito Plaza Bart. Have you decided where that is?
At the border of Albany's city limit. And so in the instance that scooters were to just stop and not be parked or, parked to anything, Stu's team is, like we've kind of been talking about, is really vigilant and is really aware of when, things need to be serviced regularly. So in that instance, like Stu would probably send someone over to North Albany frequently to just rebalance things back to where they should be or back to bike racks or whatever it is. And I think that this is a perfect situation where if we see, that our scooters are piling up kind of along the Albany Greenway at the end of the city limit, and we're, in the works with El Cerrito, but things haven't opened up yet. I think that's in a situation where we would say, hey, Justin, we're seeing this happen. It would be really great to install some bike rack infrastructure here to allow folks to park appropriately. What can we do? In other cities and in other instances, we actually help fund the paint, like we paint essentially scooter parking areas. So like in a bunch of cities during COVID, we gave away parking spaces, or cities gave away parking spaces to local businesses and restaurants to open up outdoor seating. We could give a parking space to micromobility and paint, a micromobility parking space, put up like stanchions or little poles or whatever it is to kind of rope it off to not allow folks to park there, but to create designated parking for micromobility in, the interim time between Albany and El Cerrito opening up. I think we can be kind of creative. It's a specific problem that requires a specific solution.
I guess from my standpoint, I see that as developing fairly quickly. And the Albany Greenway border with El Cerrito is a couple hundred feet off of the roadway. I don't know how you usually access scooters, but if you're trying to load a bunch of them onto a vehicle, that's a significant distance. So you might consider geofencing before that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly the idea of dedicating a parking space or two to that kind of a corral, would be something we could explore. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that kind of with the geofences, like you're saying too, kind of create a forced parking area. So not allow folks to park like within that area, but park closer to the street, which allows Stu's team to rebalance a little bit easier. We also have the option, forced parking is kind of more intense way of doing things, but we have something called lucky zones where, we can set up in our back end areas where folks can get discounts if they park in certain areas. So it kind of incentivizes them to help us maintain things in certain places. And like Stu kind of mentioned, we're really open to suggestions and are amenable to what you all see and what the residents see would be most helpful. And so if you're like, hey, this is a really high traffic spot, it seems like things are all on different corners here, let's create a lucky zone right on this corner to kind of just keep all of the scooters here, or just incentivize folks to keep the scooters here. We can absolutely be, available to those recommendations and suggestions.
Great. Do you put rack locations in your app?
We don't have rack locations. We have preferred parking locations. They don't specifically say bike racks, but that's what they are.
Okay, so it's not a catalog of bike rack locations, but it does have certain locations.
Yeah, so if you go into the app and that screenshot that we shared, all those little P with the circle that say parking locations, those are all of the bike racks that the city of Berkeley provided us with a file, GeoJSON file,
Geocode.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Of all of those locations. So we added those in the app so that people know where the bike rack infrastructure is. So if the city has something like that, we can add that for Albany as well.
I can't answer that, but
That's a Justin question.
would you take a third-party file, a non-city file?
Yeah,
If there were citizens who wanted to go out and geocode and get that to you?
I would give them a high five. Maybe buy them a coffee. That would be great. We're not opposed. I think it's more so
Okay.
about, I think we have to be most responsive specifically to Justin's team and to the city. But if, concerned citizens say, hey, I want to find out all the locations of all the available bike racks in Albany so that VO can encourage folks to park at bike racks and have that available in their app. And Justin says, this looks great. I've double checked that it's okay for us to do, that we have no issue.
Good to know. I'm not volunteering, but there may be people who are interested.
You missed out on the coffee then.
I'm a tea guy.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you for answering my questions. I noticed that it looks like in the teeny tiny picture that I saw in your presentation that the Bay Trail in Berkeley is currently a red zone north of Gilman.
Sure, let me just pull it up.
Great.
Stu, are you aware?
I guess the question is do you intend to make the Bay Trail active for use of your scooters in Albany?
I think with Albany opening up, whatever reason that may have been marked as a no ride zone before, would allow us to, if that may have been an attempt to keep vehicles from sort of unintentionally or intentionally
Deadheading.
going over the border
Mhm.
into Albany, up until October 15th, when Albany has not been a part of our service area. But with extending the service area, I'll definitely look into that. But whatever the reason was, I'm sure that we have plenty of evidence now to that we won't need to keep it as a no ride zone anymore.
Okay, thank you. We'll have a similar situation where the border with Richmond is not clear to people, and you probably won't want people to go north of Buchanan. Similarly. I think that's my questions. Are there any other commissioner questions? And I'm looking, Commissioner Graham, want to give you an option if you need it.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, let's check and see if we have public comment. And so again, this is the time when you would use the raise your hand feature. That should be available whether you're on your phone or on your computer.
Chair, I believe there's a different option if you're on a cell phone. Is that right?
Please, yeah.
Sorry, I don't remember what exactly the numbers is, but Justin will remember as well.
Justin's checking his notes on his 5 screens.
Check that.
To raise the hand, it's *9. And to unmute, it will be *6.
Great. So you need to *9 to let us know, and then *6 to unmute. I see we have at least one attendee who's on their phone, or appears to be. So just want to make sure that's clear. I'm still not seeing any attendee hands raised, so I'm going to bring it back to the commission. If somebody's struggling, please put your hand up. I'll keep an eye out. But let's bring it back to the commission for now for any further questions and for comments and opinions. Commissioner Javadal.
Thank you. Just wanted to share a little bit of background on the Lock 2 requirement for Berkeley and Oakland, and the part of the logic around that was trying to keep the sidewalk and ADA path of travel clear. Is the primary objective behind it. And the intent being that with the lock to, you don't have some random third party moving a scooter after someone has appropriately parked it within the furnishing zone. So, depending on whether an operator has pictures, to end the ride, which is a good addition to it, the lock to makes the rider accountable. They can't say, "Oh, I didn't park it there. Someone moved this." Like, no, you ended your ride and locked it. It can't have been moved. So if they've locked it to the handrail on a wheelchair ramp, which is not an appropriate place, then it's easy to say, "Nope, you put it there. You shouldn't have." And it allows VIO or any operator to hold that rider accountable. So that was kind of the thinking behind it. And yes, confirming that the annual fee that Berkeley collects is going to go into the installation of more bike racks. Because we definitely get a lot of comments from people saying, "Hey, the bike racks are filling up." And we can respond and say, yes, but the scooter operators are paying, into a program that's going to install more bike racks. So at the end of the day, there'll be more places to park, not just the scooters, but people's personal bikes and other devices. So I think that that's a nice thing to have within the program.
Great. So if somebody says, "No, but I locked the scooter to the handle of that pickup that's been parked there for 3 years. It was fine." Understood. Okay, great. Other commissioner comments? Commissioner Del Rosario.
So I like that idea of revenue generated for the city to be used towards benefits of infrastructure or other programs in the city. And so I hope that this is probably more of a comment for our next item, but I hope that staff can take that initiative to figure out what's the best revenue model for the city. Is it just, is it a simple permit fee, or is it something a little bit more complicated? And do we have goals or any things that need to get funded from an additional revenue source? The second comment I have is that I hope staff can work with, it sounds like this came up already, but I hope staff can work with the VO to develop the parking hub locations. I think there's some logic behind the thinking for the proposed locations, and it sounds like there's some flexibility there. We should probably think about where these hubs are, and can you safely ride away from these hubs? And I think there are certain locations, San Pablo Avenue, coming to mind, where that's probably not the safest location to start a trip. And we have the Greenway and some other great infrastructure for these types of devices, where it may make more sense. But I think it is a good start in understanding where you think the market is going to be, because maybe those two don't always jive, but that should be taken into consideration. I hope staff can work with VO to do that.
Absolutely. One more comment I'll make. In addition to the service that we provide to the city, we share data with all of the cities that we operate in. So we can provide, an mobility data specification feed, MDS feed to the city. We're also partnered with a company, and we'll be rolling this out later this year, early next, called Blue Systems, which is a data aggregator. It's similar to a ride reporter Populous. And so each city that we operate in will have their own dashboard where they can see all of the trips that are being taken in the city, see high ridership areas, and use that data to inform the locations of additional infrastructure. Or maybe if you're trying to fund a new bike rack or bikeway, or bike lane or whatever it is, you can see, okay, we can see clearly that a lot of shared use mobility rides are being taken along this corridor. this seems like the perfect place to kind of initially start to include more biking infrastructure, whether that be the parking or shared use lane or a bike lane.
Great. Commissioner Peng.
Hey, this is a question for Justin. So after VO roll it out, are we gonna see this data at the beginning of every commissioners meeting? Combined with the shared mobility data?
Yeah, we would work on reporting similar to what we've been doing with gig so that you would see regular reports on the usage.
Okay, thanks.
Great. So we had some correspondence asking questions about how you keep people from riding on the sidewalk.
Sure. We periodically send out, communications to riders reminding them not to ride on the sidewalk. Something that I really appreciate about our seated device is that it really does feel more like a bike when you're riding, although it is a scooter. So people don't tend to ride them on the sidewalk. They're pretty imposing. They're about 90 pounds. They're not really bigger than a typical bike, but because they're just more comfortable to be ridden on, in a shared use lane or in a bike lane, we typically see folks riding in the street rather than on the sidewalk. As with any company, we're in the process of kind of developing our sidewalk riding detection technology, whatever that is. We have pilots running in some cities, including San Jose, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and Minneapolis, and are starting to see positive results. What we can do and what has worked fairly well in some of those cities is geofence certain corridors that are high traffic that we may expect to see sidewalk riding, and actually create audible notifications to remind folks not to ride the sidewalk. We've seen a lot of success with this because of the kind of like awkwardness of like, if you're riding a scooter in the sidewalk and the scooter tells you not to be riding in the sidewalk, you typically feel a little uncomfortable. So you'll get off the sidewalk. It's kind of like responding to your peers and feeling uncomfortable. So that's been something
I guess
that has
everybody around you would hear the scooter telling you to get off the sidewalk too.
Yeah,
so
that'd be pretty
could be
embarrassing.
Helpful. Yeah.
Exactly. And so within those corridors, as you're entering and exiting the corridor and periodically throughout the corridor, you'll just get a continued audible notification saying, hey, just a reminder, don't ride on the sidewalk. So that's one way that we've seen it's actually been quite effective. What's great about that solution, rather than kind of cutting the GPS or slowing people down, is that if there was to be any GPS error, you're not stopping people who are riding in a bike lane or in a shared use lane who may be, also riding with other traffic. And so I'm riding, 25 feet in front of a Honda Civic, and the GPS pings inappropriately. And the way that this company has set up their GPS technology, it stops or slows me down. And all of a sudden that car behind me has to stop or slow down. And let's hope that they're paying attention. And so we really prefer not to slow or limit speed for the riders, but really to just encourage folks to use the devices properly. And that's why community engagement is really so important to us too, is to just get out there and remind folks, hey, this is how you ride. This is the most appropriate way to ride. This is how to be safe. One other great feature that we have on our Astro scooters and that we'll be implementing on our seated scooters, the Astro is the standing, is an integrated turn signal. So on the newer version, there's actually a turn signal on the device that you can kind of access when you're holding onto the handlebars to let folks know which way you'll be turning without having to remove your hands from the handlebars. We also have underdeck lighting and some other really great features. But all of those things kind of help deter folks. Just make it more clear to folks that that is a device that should be ridden in a bike lane rather than on the sidewalk.
And each of our vehicles have a sticker on them with a whole bunch of rules. And at the top of those rules, in all caps, it says no riding on sidewalks.
Okay. So I've been watching the rollout around Berkeley a little bit, especially at the top of Solano, and one of the things I've seen is that the scooters tend to get what looks like staged at several different bike racks in a row, And what I hear back from at least one user is that sometimes those bike racks are against diagonal parking, and most cyclists don't want to park on the other side of the bike rack with facing the car. They're worried about getting pinched in. So I guess the ask here is that please consider doubling up your scooters on racks and leaving alternate racks available. This becomes potentially an even larger issue in Albany, where we have the bike racks, and you can choose by the way you park at a bike rack to leave it open to 3 other cyclists or devices, or you can cover up an entire middle of a side. And again, we'd love it if you would, use the outside wheel of the bike racks to stage your scooters and leave an abundance of parking available to all.
Yeah, I think, so the reason that they're parked like that in Berkeley, I will say, is because Berkeley has mandated in their program that operators are limited to 1 device per bike rack one device per bike rack, period. And so we can't double up in Berkeley. In Oakland, we're limited to 2. We can, if Albany, says that's great, but we don't have the bike rack infrastructure right now to allow us to, only deploy 2 bike racks. We can deploy near bike racks, not lock, or lock multiple to 1 bike rack and leave others available. Obviously, users are going to kind of move things around organically. But that's where we can be amenable, and Stu's local team is absolutely willing to be amenable to, like you're saying, put it on the street side rather than the other side, because, cyclists don't want to get pinched in by the cars on that side. Awesome. That's something that Stu has the ability to communicate to his local team, because he manages, employees rather than contractors. He's able to kind of delegate those responsibilities to them more adequately. And we can also, choose if there are locations where cyclists are complaining that there's no bike rack infrastructure, we just don't have to deploy to the bike racks there. We can deploy next to the bike racks or adjacent to the bike racks to leave that infrastructure for now open to folks until more bike rack infrastructure is able to be added to those locations. So I think it's just about being responsive, to the community, but that's a fair assessment and something we'll definitely keep an eye on.
Great. Thank you. I think that's the end of my questions. Are there any further comments and questions from commissioners? Seeing none, thank you so much for coming and answering our questions and giving your presentation. And we'll be the next item is us considering our program and rules. And we look forward to your events and the rollout of scooters in Albany.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being, it felt really great to answer so many specific questions about, where you want the program to go and the expectations. And so, I appreciate that folks had this really well thought out and had some really fantastic questions for us today. It's great to share all this information, and we're really excited about opening up our service area in Albany. I will share the details of the town hall once I've confirmed everything with Councilman Gary. It will be October 5th, though, at 6 p.m. The location is still TBD, but I'll be sure to share that over to Justin and to kind of the group here in case anyone wants to attend or come to the demo ride the following Saturday. And then I'll get you to download that app and you'll get to ride one yourself.
I didn't say I hadn't.
Okay, perfect. Well, then you'll be teaching the demo rides for everyone else. All right, thank you so much. And again, Justin, I appreciate you working with us throughout this process.
Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Terrific.
Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to item number 5.4, the draft municipal code amendments for regulation of shared mobility devices. How timely.
Thank you, Chair. Let me share my screen. And yes, we're not going far off topic here. So I don't think I'll need too much background, which is great. But I'll be talking about our draft regulations, a municipal code amendment, and also draft permit requirements for shared scooters. So I won't go into the dockless micromobility technology too much, since we just heard all about it from our last speakers, but we are talking about the same type of technology, the shared scooters that do not need to be docked in specific places, but can be parked at, any bike racks or similar amenities, and they're shared between users. People can go on short rides and then leave it, and then another person can come along and take a ride. So we're talking about the same technology here. And Albany does have some experience with this. Back in 2018 and 2019, the company Lime deployed several dockless bikes, as well as some scooters throughout Albany. That ended in 2019, as it did in many cities in the area, because of several class action lawsuits related to accessibility concerns, specifically relating to the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so a lot of the shared scooter operators went off the streets for a time, but the Oakland lawsuit was settled last year. And since then, several neighboring cities have made new regulations that are in line with the decisions of that suit. And since then, several scooter companies have launched across the area, including, as we heard earlier, in Berkeley and Emeryville. So the changes that we have drafted out for you tonight kind of come in two categories. The first is changes to our municipal code. And these are a little bit more, a little simpler, and really focusing mostly on parking regulations. But they first do require these shared scooter companies to apply for permits to operate in the city. And they allow the city engineer to establish and adjust more detailed conditions. And I'll get into those in a moment, but basically it's separating a lot of the more specific requirements into the permit process and keeping it away from the municipal code area of this. And then the meat of the municipal code changes is in the parking regulations, as I said, requiring the devices to be parked upright and locked to a bike rack or similar, pole, something like that. And they cannot block the right of way or a whole variety of important features of our streets, such as disabled parking spaces, curb ramps, fire hydrants. I won't go through them all, but all these things that are very important for us to keep clear and accessible. We also have a few pieces for enforcement of these parking requirements. In particular, that operators need to have a clear way to receive complaints about parking, specifically with phone numbers that are on the devices themselves. And they have to respond to those complaints within 3 hours. If the operators are not complying with this requirement and are leaving the improperly parked scooters around, then the city is given the power to charge fines to the operators, to remove or dispose of the device, to cap the number of allowed devices in the cities, and eventually revoke the permit if necessary. So again, the municipal code is really focused on dealing with the accessibility concerns related to the parking of the devices and making sure we're keeping the streets clear and dealing with improperly parked devices in a timely manner. Then we also have the draft permit requirements. These would be outside of the municipal code. And the main reason for that is to provide flexibility for adjustment of these as needs might change, and as more companies come into the city, and we realize things we didn't know or whatever else. It's easy to adjust these permit requirements without needing to go back into the municipal code and spending a long process with that. So the permit requirements as drafted include the same parking requirements that I listed above, just for clarity. And then a variety of requirements that are taken from the Emeryville and Berkeley ordinances. And really it's almost identical to Emeryville's requirements with a few extra things sprinkled in from Berkeley. I won't go into all of those in detail. They are attached in your packet for today, but they cover user education, pollution prevention, device specifications, equity access, accessibility and affordability, data and privacy, and community engagement. And many of these kind of cover some of the things that our last presenter was speaking about, some of the programs they have, and the way that their devices are set up. I'll just mention a few highlights from this. First, that the applications as well as the devices themselves have to explain the rules of the road, things like no riding on sidewalks, requirements about wearing helmets if you're under 18 and, making sure you're parking properly. All those things need to be clear to the users. They need to provide helmets upon request, free of charge. Also providing that photo of the park device in hopes to increase compliance among users, and having a maximum speed of 15 miles an hour, in addition to also requiring that they're able to lower the maximum speed for slow zones when necessary. They need to have accessible devices as well as a low income program, which we heard about a moment ago. They need to share data with the city regarding, how many rides are being taken, where people are going, a whole variety of things, again, listed in the attachments. And then it also allows the city to include requirements about parking and riding locations. And this is something that we don't have anything laid out in the draft permit requirements right now, but it would allow us to change the requirements at any time, and to do things like implementing no parking zones or no riding zones, requiring that there be hubs in certain locations for equity concerns or whatnot. Things to try to adjust the way that these are distributed throughout the city and used throughout the city. And again, key for making that flexible and being able to adjust as needs arise and as problems might arise. Also, one other note regarding the Bay Trail. Right now in our municipal code, motorized devices are not allowed on the Bay Trail. So these would technically be not allowed on the Bay Trail, but the city engineer is empowered to make exceptions to that rule, and we do recommend for the city engineer to make an exception for these devices and allow them on the Bay Trail. So the staff recommendation is for the committee to recommend the draft municipal code language and permit requirements to the city council for adoption. I will note that there are several parts of this that still need to be finalized by staff, and in particular, working with our legal team and insurance team to make sure that all of our language regarding legal and insurance requirements is what it needs to be. So ideally, recommending these draft requirements with an allowance for those minor edits as needed. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Before we open it up to commissioner questions, Ms. Plaza, could you remind us what the fee structure is in general?
Yeah, we don't have that completely laid out at this point. Jeff or Justin might have more details, but I think at this point, our draft version of it would be a permit application fee as well as some sort of annual fee.
And are those fees meant to take care of just the administrative details, or would those cover funds for adding bike racks or reassigning parking spaces, that kind of thing?
I wasn't here for the July discussion, but I believe there was discussion around definitely the bike infrastructure being a piece that we would want to fund. We see that is going to be a need, at least for the initial rollout of these in the first year or two. So yes, that would be a key piece to what we would be looking for from the fee.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. And let's take commissioner questions. And Commissioner Graham, unless you speak up or I see your hand, which I don't right now, we'll assume that you don't have any questions. Are there any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Del Rosario.
Thanks, and thanks for the presentation. I have a few questions. So this is sort of discussed in the last presentation, but actually, no, never mind. I think I saw it in the draft guidelines. I was going to ask about what objects you can and cannot lock to, but I think there's a list. Is that correct?
Yeah, it specifically requires that you can't lock to trees. But yeah, aside from that, bike racks or other fixed objects such as poles would be okay.
Okay. And then I think it was sort of indirectly said about not blocking the sidewalk. I think it was not blocking like accessible paths, or well, I don't even think it said that. I wonder if we could be more explicit about that. And it also sounds like can you park the device on the sidewalk, provided that there is an accessible path around as long as they meet the minimum requirements for accessible path in the city?
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, most of our current bike racks are in the sidewalk area. I don't know that we would be able to distinguish for the user that other than saying that they need to leave the sidewalk clear and they need to walk to a device, not to a fixed object.
Yeah.
But open to other suggestions on how you would address that.
Okay. I think there was explicit mention about no use on unpaved roads in Albany Hill and also on the Bulb, I think. So if there are, I just wasn't sure, are there any opportunities that presumes that you can use it on paved paths on Albany Hill, but are there any places you can actually park up there, and will we have to create those? It just seems like it's quite tight to end a destination there, and I don't know if we can control that or not.
Yes, so I can field this one, Michelle. The regulations that Michelle referenced, there are separate from our vehicle regulations. There's in the parks area, there is no motorized vehicles on Albany Hill or the waterfront, which is defined west of the freeway. So I think we would want the Bay Trail to be usable for these, but not proceeding into the Bulb further west. So that's how I think we were trying to make that distinction, that the paved path going through the waterfront is okay, but not going off of that. On Albany Hill, on the street, there's, I think, a bike rack up at the top. But we should be clear if I know we did some improvements recently, if that's paved, we maybe want to think whether we're really wanting scooters to go on there or not. So open to feedback on that piece.
Okay. I think Ken already asked about permit fees. There were just a couple of minor edits. I think under the item G under the permit application, I think that was still referencing Berkeley, so that just has to be updated for Albany. And I think the same for device specifications, item B. Also,
yeah, we caught that recently.
Okay, cool. And then I saw for customer communications that the other language than English identified as Spanish. Are there other languages that does Albany have safe harbor languages where you have to identify which languages you need to translate materials in, and I wasn't sure if Spanish was the only one or if there was also Chinese text.
We often do include Chinese. Is something we should check if they're already doing that, Berkeley and Emeryville, if that's something that would be an added ask. We should double check on that one.
Okay. I think that's it for my questions. Thanks.
Let me branch off of one of Commissioner Rosario's questions on unpaved areas. So the bulb is pretty clear. The Albany Hill is pretty clear. Might get a little more muddy when you think about Memorial Park. I guess it could be considered that all the paths in Memorial Park are sidewalks. I guess with both of these situations, I'm wondering if we need to think about signage to reinforce where the barriers are.
Yeah, I think that's also part of a potential conversation where there might be areas we want to require no ride zones. So for instance, if we want to make sure no one's riding on the paths or Memorial Park, we could require the operators to make it impossible to operate the devices on those paths.
Yeah, and I would suggest Memorial Park is definitely one place you might think about that. So just to check, I mean, the Greenway would be an allowed use area under these regulations?
Yes.
Do we have a speed limit on the Greenway?
We do not. I know in our earlier presentation from a couple of years ago, we went through what the rules were for different paths. I have not verified that the state rules haven't changed from that, but we don't have any city specific rules on the speeds for motorized or electric vehicles.
Okay. I know we've had some feedback from residents about electric bikes on the Greenway going faster than they were comfortable with. Something to keep an eye on, I guess. And now back to other commissioner questions. Not seeing any, I'll ask one, two more. So we talked in the last item about the idea of creating drop zones from parking spaces. Is that an administrative thing that staff can take care of offline from the commission, or what's the timing on how fast a response could be with that? Or is that an unknown at this time?
It's unknown. It's a work in progress. I don't think we would need to come to the commission unless we were talking about parking spaces. That's been our default, is if we're utilizing a vehicle space that we would have a notice discussion of that. We plan to, with VIO's proposed rollout, to go through hub locations and at least start looking at where we are lacking, and should have pretty quick feedback on that as they are placing vehicles. So it most likely will be a bit iterative in terms of seeing where there's a need and trying to address that as they roll out.
If the city used some of the corner red zones or spaces that were too small for parking spaces, is that something that could be implemented quicker? Because it wouldn't take away a parking space.
Yeah, we will have to look at that. If we're putting out stencil or designated areas or something new, we may want to have a conversation with you on that as we do that. We are still needing to figure that out.
Fair enough. those are my questions. Last chance for commissioner comments or questions before we take it to public comment. Seeing none, I will ask if our two identical attendees, identically named attendees, wish to comment on this item. Seeing none, let's bring it back to the commissioners for opinions, comments, etc. And our goal here is to actually make a recommendation to City Council if we can. Commissioner Javidal.
Sorry, I had to unmute there. I think that designating no ride zones at schools and Memorial Park definitely makes sense to me. I think throw in perhaps Ocean View Park as well. I mean, these are primarily for transportation, not for riding around in parks. And the concern in parks being that it's, you know, is it a path? Is it a sidewalk? Is it, you know, and you got little kids probably there. It just feels like the kind of place that we want to not use these devices. So then as far as the fees, again, I'm good with there being flexibility on how we spend those, especially evolving over time. But I do think that I agree with the sentiment that there are places where we might want more bike racks, bike corrals. Daylighted intersections is a great place to put them where, you know, that's a red curb that we can put that space to use, and especially scooters are not a big visibility obstacle. So that's probably a very efficient use of space. But I'd love to see the fees initially go towards that and towards, you know, filling in bike racks at some of the desired hubs. You know, maybe more than one bike rack at the top of Albany Hill. Things like that, so that we encourage the behavior we want to see by providing the opportunity to do the right thing in those locations. If there's going to be an expansion to El Cerrito, maybe we don't need to worry about the Greenway at the city limit. But in the meantime, you know, maybe it might be good to throw in a couple of bike racks right at the border there. So otherwise, I like it. I had plenty of input into, you know, Berkeley's regulations, as well as communication with cities of Oakland and Emeryville. So having drawn from that, I'm generally pretty happy with the basis of this.
Great. Other commissioner comments? I'm sorry, I'm flipping screens a little bit. Commissioner Del Rosario.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Javandel's comments. I think there's just an opportunity, and I'm hoping by flexibility in setting permit fees, that means that there's the opportunity for staff to enter into negotiations with these companies to maximize the amount of revenue that we can get out of this, so we can, you know, have these other programs. I don't know if that needs to be explicitly stated in the policy, but I'm hoping that's what the intention is there. I mentioned a few other things about just minor edits, but also the languages for communications should be updated. I wanted to explore the thought that I think Chairman Krosky mentioned and Vio responded to about limiting occupancy on bike racks. That's a great idea. I just don't know if we have enough bike racks in the city to do that. So I don't know how we make that calculation of figuring this out. You know, maybe we have an idea of how many devices there are from this first company, and then have to make some sort of estimation. But that also then feeds into, we need more bike racks to accommodate these. So hopefully it'd be great if we could do that. I guess we just have to figure out if we have the ability to, like, do we have enough racks to do that? Yeah, I'd like to see just more clarification or just more directness on the language about blocking the sidewalk. And just explicitly mention, accessible pathways and sidewalks and how they can't be blocked. Maybe, and that should probably be the first bullet point, it seems. I'm trying to see the rest of my comments. I think that's everything.
Sorry, Commissioner Del Rosario, I'll just note there is some language about accessible pathways, but I cut it down for the presentation.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think that's everything for me.
Great. We have at least two commissioners who haven't had, I see I've got a hand from Commissioner Graham. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And I also second Commissioner Javandal's comments. And I was wondering, and I don't know if it belongs in this language, but if there is an opportunity for us to incorporate, and maybe it's in the affordability section, but something that is about sort of like bulk buying of as a transportation demand management tool that could be offered as part of some of our new developments that, when we're talking about minimizing the amount of parking. And I don't actually know if that would go in this language here or not, but I'd just like you to maybe consider it if possible. And that's my only additional comment.
Great. Commissioner Peng, do you have any comments?
In general, I would like to hold a really flexible attitude towards this. I don't want to over policing this before seeing it in effect, because I think other cities, for example, like the Commissioner Del Rosario was talking about, like limiting the topic of limiting one per bike rack area. I think other cities have this because they have 3 or 4 different companies operating it. We only have one, and actually at this moment we should just set the rules a little bit loose and see how it comes, and we always can adapt later. I don't want to over regulate, so that's my only comment.
Great, thank you. I also think that we should give staff a lot of flexibility to adapt as they can. And I'm always trying to avoid my tendency to micromanage. But having said that, it occurs to me that we have to think about places like the affordable housing complex that's being implemented at Pearson, Washington. Having external bike racks becomes more important. And I also like Commissioner Javadal's comments about looking at the places where we need to geofence, including the parks and the schools. Terrace Park could become a cut through, and it's a park for very young kids, among other things. So yeah, and I think it's interesting as I look at the map that we saw in the last item of where they're looking at putting their primary locations. The town center is an obvious choice. And the comment was that it fronts on San Pablo, but it also has a driveway back to Adams Street. But I'm not sure that anybody would necessarily know that if they're just casually coming to that location for the first time. So interesting considerations. And it'll be interesting to see how this rolls out and how we can help massage the parameters and encourage and to some extent constrain, but encourage this micro mobility with electric power and hopefully well sourced. So thank you, staff. And at this time, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Javadal.
In the interest of flexibility, I'm going to suggest, or I'll move that we recommend council adopt an ordinance amending the Albany Municipal Code to include proposed permitting regulations of shared micromobility services with staff consideration of the commission's comments.
I'll second.
Graham seconds. And now we have discussion. Any comments or discussion? I'm not going to take that as a comment. I have one. I think I would be interested in offering a friendly amendment to explicitly note that we would like the fees to include enough money to help implement increased infrastructure for parking of these
happy to
and
accept
other
that.
devices. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm happy to accept that. Yes.
Okay. Staff, was that clear enough? Should I restate that? It's clear enough. Okay. Other discussion? Seeing none, I will ask staff to Mr. Freed to take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Del Rosario,
Yes.
Commissioner Javando,
Aye.
Commissioner Peng,
Yes.
Vice Chair Graham,
Aye.
Chair McCroskey.
Yes,
Motion carries. Thank you.
great. Okay, that's the end of our item 5. We move on to announcements.
I have a few announcements. The sidewalk repair phase 5 was completed in August. I was going to report out that council on Monday took action on the outdoor dining program and approved that. So we will be working on the parklets and working with the existing permit holders, hoping to bring all of them into the new program requirements. Sets a deadline of removing those under the temporary permits end of March next year, or if they've come in with a new application by end of January, they will have through May to complete improvements or construction of the new installations.
Mr. Freed, there was a question about the wording of that policy. Did they select?
It's, to be clear, it is not program guidelines. We have taken guidelines out. These are program regulations. So these are the rules that they need to be constructing their parklets by.
Great. Actually, I was wondering about the city council and whether they selected the recommendation of the Economic Development Commission or the recommendation of our group.
They struck out, so they followed the Transportation Commission recommendation and removed the 40% of parking spaces, triggering a requirement to just do 2 spaces after that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Left it to hire review for a 3rd space as serving that need.
Great.
And they also completed the first reading of ordinance to amend the speed limit on Solano Avenue. Recommendation from this commission from February. So the second reading will be October 3rd's council meeting and take effect, assuming that that is approved, take effect a month from that. So we'll be working to have new speed limit signs ready to go once that takes effect.
Terrific.
And the other thing I was going to note, council did meet in person this Monday, and the expected rollout for advisory bodies is that commissions can expect to meet in person next month. So plan on that, barring any additional changes you hear from me. That is the current rollout plan to starting to switch back to in person. It was a hybrid meeting, so members of the public could still participate on Zoom and could make public comment on Zoom. So that capability has been added into our council chambers, and we're working through how all that works, but it worked pretty smoothly with council on Monday.
Great. So as commissioners, we would revert to the former rules where if we're going to be absent and we want to participate, we have to be in a public location and publish that information.
That's correct.
Okay. Great.
And the other announcement item was trying to firm up a date for this commission's November, December meeting. I heard from a couple commissioners, but if others have priority amongst the dates that were suggested, I have Thursday, December 1st at 7:30. We have a 5 o'clock economic development meeting. That's the time we've done the last couple of years, that first Thursday coming back, but a little later. There's a Thursday, December 15th that's available, or Wednesday, December 7th, or keeping the fourth Thursday because it's before the closure, it's December 22nd. Responses I got were 1 no for December 22nd and 1 least priority for that date. But would like to hear if there's other availability. I had 1 prioritization listed that Thursday, December 1st was the top choice. So if there's feedback from other commissioners on that, or can continue down the ranking. But ideally, we could set that date tonight.
Who else can, my preferences are pretty well covered in what was communicated. Are there other preferences that can be expressed tonight? Or non-preferences? If you don't have an issue with any of those dates, please say so. Commissioner Javdal.
I'd be happy with December 1st. Probably okay with December 15th, but that could change if my Transportation and Infrastructure Commission in Berkeley decides to have a December meeting.
I would be fine with December 1st.
Great.
I'm flexible other than December 22nd.
Great.
I'm flexible. So any dates works.
Great.
Sounds like December 1st, 7:30.
That would be our first choice from what it sounds like.
All right. We will go ahead and get that posted on the city calendar. Thank you.
Terrific. Okay, that's announcements. We move on to future agenda items. This is a chance for commissioners to request future agenda items. We don't take public comment on this item. Are there, first of all, Mr. Freed, can you tell us what we can expect in the near term?
We expect the next report on the local road safety plan for next month's meeting. We also did note to City Council in the discussion on the parklets program that we would be looking at a green curb on Solano near the post office. There's one parklet that is utilizing an existing green zone. So given that we've given another 6 months for the existing facilities, we're going to look at just moving over the green zone for the time being.
Great. Are there other requests for agenda items from commissioners?
I'm getting reminded, we also had at the council meeting on Monday, all advisory bodies have been asked to take a look at the existing work plan and go through the work status for those items and provide that to council for them to have a discussion in November, so that the existing council can take a look at the advisory body's roles and responsibilities, and if there's any recommendations they want to make to a new council. So that'll be on next month's meeting as well.
Okay. Great. I think that does it for me. Let's see. So I'm not seeing any other raised hands for commissioners. So our next meeting will be October 27th at 7 p.m. in person. Remember, it takes more time to get to, I'm reminding myself, it takes more time to get to City Hall. And maybe I'll wear long pants. Great. Thanks to staff, thanks to commissioners for a good meeting, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Good night.
Thank you.
Right.